Welcome to Practically Political. It's great to have you with us again. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Let's get to it, Dave. All right, so breaking news overnight. It looks like the Congressional Republicans want to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. I think I know what you're going to say, that you shouldn't impeach people for bad action. It has to be something different, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But also, just in general, can you agree that the Biden administration is failing to enforce the immigration laws passed by Congress? And as such, there is a logical argument to say this person is in gross dereliction of the duty. I mean, you're talking about millions of people. I just pulled up some statistics. According to the U.S. Border Patrol, more than 6 million people have been apprehended along the border with Mexico under the Biden administration, and more than 2 million have been detected but not apprehended. And you're talking about the number of asylum seekers. It rose from 458,000 in fiscal 2020 to 1.7 million in fiscal 2021, 2.4 million in fiscal 22, and 2.5 million in fiscal 23. So that's just, to me, it's utter incompetence, and it is actually in flagrant violation. The executive branch is meant to enforce the legislative branch. So to me, I think Mayorkas is violating the separation of powers. What do you think?
Okay, so is that your question? Because there was a lot in there. that was quite an event, Carrie. But so your question is the impeachment worthwhile because he's violating what you say is law, and they're not enforcing the law? Is that it? Well, first of all, I think that, and again, this is true with Governor Walker in Wisconsin. It was true with Newsom in California. I don't believe that you impeach or recall people over policy differences. Okay, so yes, you could have made an argument in all the cases that, oh, they're not following the law, their policy should have been instituted, all this. But the bottom line is, this is a policy issue. This is not a legal issue. I think most people would agree with that. And by the way, this is the same thing. I'm happy to see that the House has cooled off on their impeachment of Joe Biden for basically a lot of stuff that his son did when he wasn't even in office, for crying out loud. So that's the same policy. You impeach people. With Trump, at least, there was the phone call. Okay, that was pretty, with Zelensky, so that was pretty clear. Then there was January 6th. So there were reasons. At least people didn't disagree on the reason that he's being impeached. In this case, there is. Now, having said that, yes, could the Biden administration be doing more? But Republicans have a chance to do more on the border, which we'll talk about in a bit. So the short answer to your question is no. I think this is still, and again, this opens a real can of worms here, right? Because if you're able to start impeaching people over what you think is policy, or at least a gray area over enforcement, I mean, this is going to be endless. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, that's true. I don't want a slippery slope, but let's get real. The left has never, ever, ever been shy about trying to weaponize everything. So I think in this case, like, the fact is that I do, and this is the debate, I do believe that this is gross negligence and that it is in violation of congressional law. I think that's different from policy. I agree with you. You shouldn't impeach someone because of a policy disagreement. I do agree with you on that. But I think in this case, it is such a gross dereliction that, I mean, you had this recent Supreme Court ruling, which, I do believe in separation of powers. There's federal and state. So I don't think I agree with the rationale. I understand why the federal government needed to assert itself, but at the same time, it's also in gross dereliction of its executive branch duty. So I think the ruling itself was flawed, but I agree with you, though. So we can at least agree that you shouldn't impeach on policy, but can you at least see where I'm coming from, that he is in gross dereliction of the laws passed by Congress, which is another separation of powers. Do you see this as a potential separation of powers?
Well, first of all, I just chortle when I hear anyone from the right talk about weaponizing government, because it gets back to this Donald Trump's strategy of I'm rubber and you're glue. So there's nobody who has weaponized the government. And by the way, who says openly that he's going to weaponize the government even more if he gets back in. So that one's a laugher. But putting that aside, yes, I think it's a very gray area. And you mentioned another important point, okay? If the federal law trumps state law, that is one of the bedrocks of our Constitution. And it's a Supreme Court, okay, and this is a conservative Supreme Court, right? This is not back to the, days of that fawned the religious right, the Roe v. Wade days. This is a conservative court. When they say you have that, and they make a ruling, states have to abide by it. Again, because talk about a slippery slope. Every state, I'm sure, can come up with a reason that they don't like a federal court or a Supreme Court ruling. And you've got to be able to abide by that. And this is where I really worry about things getting out of control and having one constitutional crisis after another.